Think about this. A solo-developed game about dealing drugs had more people playing it than some of the world's biggest franchises. How on earth did this happen? Out of nowhere, a $20 indie game shot to the top of the Steam charts, beating out the biggest AAA giants. Schedule 1, a bold drug-dealing simulator built almost entirely by a solo developer. Practically overnight, this quirky game shot past huge titles like Assassin's Creed Shadows, becoming the #1 seller on Steam. On its very first day, Schedule 1 peaked at over 116,000 concurrent players, almost double the launch numbers of Assassin's Creed Shadows. Within a week, it surged even higher, hitting 414,000 plus players online at once. It's a question that stunned gamers and industry veterans alike. Schedule 1 came out of nowhere, with no big marketing campaign or famous studio behind it, yet it was outperforming heavy hitters like Marvel Rivals, PUBG, and GTA 5 on the charts. Even Ubisoft's massive Assassin's Creed Shadows, a game many assumed would dominate 2025, was left in the dust. The mystery deepens when you realize Shadows had an army of developers and a 4A budget, yet it only peaked around 64,000 players on Steam, while this scrappy indie was 4 times higher. It's almost embarrassing for the AAA industry when you put it that way. So, what's the secret sauce here? How did this small, unknown game manage to hit gamers right in the feels and make the gaming giants look clumsy and outdated in the process? Stick around, because the story of Schedule 1 might just be the wake-up call the gaming world needed. Now, you might be wondering, what on earth is this game anyway? On the surface, Schedule 1 sounds like a gritty crime simulator, an open-world, first-person drug-dealing sim set in the fictional West Coast city of Highland Point. You start with no money, no product, no connections, and your goal is to build a drug empire from scratch. It's the kind of premise you'd expect to be dark or serious. But here's the twist. Schedule 1 isn't some dark, gritty crime simulator like you'd expect. It's surprisingly cozy, fun, and addictive. More like a light-hearted tycoon game than a violent underworld saga. Weird mechanics and unexpected charm are at the heart of Schedule 1's appeal. Players find themselves doing all sorts of things, producing batches of different drugs, setting up makeshift labs in RVs, very Breaking Bad style, managing supply chains, and even skateboarding or driving around town to make deliveries. Sounds crazy, right? There's a strategic, almost management sim layer where you have to monitor your production, controlling lighting and growth cycles for your plants, hiring dealers and workers, and expanding into new properties as your empire grows. It's like running a little business, except your product happens to be illegal substances. The result is gameplay that scratches the same itch as a good city builder or tycoon game. Tone-wise, Schedule 1 doesn't take itself too seriously. It sports a simple, almost cartoonish art style and peppers in a lot of humor and absurd situations. For example, you might end up in a ridiculous chase with the local police or laughing at the antics of your AI dealers on the streets. Even the intense moments, like getting busted by a cop, have a tongue-in-cheek vibe rather than a stressful one. This playful presentation is a huge part of why players describe the game as surprisingly charming. Compared to a more realistic game like Drug Dealer Simulator, which is a similar concept, Schedule 1 feels much more polished and full of heart, despite being made by just one guy. In fact, gamers and critics noted that the solo developer managed to outdo a whole studio by making his game more fun, accessible, and enjoyable from day one. Another big factor in Schedule 1's success is how player-friendly it is. The game launched in early access for a fair price of $20 and even discounted to around $17 at launch, which is a steal considering how much content it offers. From the get-go, the developer was upfront about his plans: monthly content updates, a growing roadmap, and a willingness to listen to community feedback on features. This approach made players feel respected and involved, and unlike many early access titles, Schedule 1 arrived in a pretty solid, playable state. No game-breaking bugs, no half-baked systems. It wasn't janky or frustrating, it just worked. Word spread quickly that Schedule 1 was worth the time, and positive reviews poured in. In fact, it's currently sitting at an overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam, with hundreds of thousands of reviews praising its unique gameplay. 1 week into release, players were already clamoring for more, and the solo dev, Tyler, responded by pushing out patches as fast as possible and promising bigger content drops on the horizon. It's the kind of enthusiastic post-launch support you usually only see from dev teams with true passion for their game. So, here we have Schedule 1, a game game with a bizarre concept that turned out to be ridiculously engaging, a rough theme that somehow feels lighthearted and fun, and a developer who actually cares about the players. It's the perfect recipe for a breakout hit. But this story isn't just about one indie game. Schedule One's triumph highlights a bigger shift happening in gaming right now, one that has gigantic implications for both small indie studios and the AAA giants they're up against. It's not just Schedule One. All across the industry, indie games are punching far above their weight and capturing gamers' hearts, and there are a few key reasons why these underdog games are thriving while many AAA titles are stumbling. First and foremost is passion and creativity. Unlike massive corporate studios that have to please investors, small indie teams or solo devs like Schedule One's Tyler are usually driven by one thing: a love for their game. They can take risks on weird, original ideas because they're not boxed in by corporate mandates. This means indies often deliver fresh gameplay and unique stories that feel like a breath of fresh air. As one article put it, indie devs focus on games that prioritize the player experience over monetization, fueled by creativity rather than shareholder demands. Gamers can sense that. There's a soul in these games, a sense that it was made by a gamer for gamers, and that creates a real connection. Early access titles like Schedule One also showcase how involving the community can lead to success. Indie developers often use early access not just as a beta test, but as a collaborative development phase. In the case of Schedule One, Tyler explicitly said he wanted to involve the community in the game's development and would even poll players on what they'd like to see next. This kind of feedback loop is incredibly powerful. Players feel heard and valued, and the game gets better and better based on real audience input. It's a stark contrast to AAA games that often release a finished product and can be slow or reluctant to make changes. Another reason indie games are booming is the shift in what players want. In recent years, gamers have grown weary of the typical AAA formula. They're hungry for something new and genuine. A lot of the biggest surprise hits have been indie or small team projects that feel different. Think of the explosion of Among Us a few years back, or how Vampire Survivors became a worldwide addiction. These games didn't succeed because of billion-dollar marketing. They succeeded because players enjoyed them and told their friends. Word of mouth and organic popularity play a huge role in indie success. Streamers and YouTubers will pick up a fun indie game out of genuine interest, not because they're paid to, and that authenticity resonates with viewers. In the case of Schedule One, it came out of nowhere and dominated Steam simply because it was fun and different. People saw others playing this odd drug dealer sim and thought, I gotta try that. It spread like wildfire organically, which is something money can't always buy. Importantly, indie games treat players right. They're not usually riddled with aggressive microtransactions. They don't ask you for $70 up front and then shove a cash shop in your face. A lot of indie devs make it a point to give good value. Schedule One's $20 price tag for countless hours of gameplay being a prime example. When an indie does monetization, it's often fair and minimal because they know a happy player is more valuable in the long run. This player-first mentality is drawing gamers in. The success of titles like Rust or newer hits like Lethal Company shows that if you keep improving your game and stick to your vision, players will stick with you. It's not always about fancy graphics or massive scale. Often, it's about gameplay depth and originality. Finally, let's not underestimate the human element. When you play an indie game, you often can sense the developer's presence. Through frequent updates, candid devlogs, or interactions on Discord or Reddit, there's a personal touch. The Schedule One dev posting on Reddit, amazed and thankful when his game blew up, is a heartwarming story. Gamers love that. It feels like supporting a friend or an underdog rather than feeding a giant corporation. And when that underdog succeeds, players feel like they were part of it. That emotional reward, I was part of this game's rise and I love it, is something that keeps the indie scene thriving with a dedicated fan base. Over the past few years, players have grown increasingly frustrated with how big budget games are made and sold. Bloated budgets are part of the problem. When a game costs tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars to develop, it becomes a high-stakes product. Publishers get ultra-conservative because so much money is on the line. They're less willing to take creative risks and more focused on formulas that they hope will show a return on investment. The result? We keep seeing the same copy-paste sequels and shallow open-world games that follow a tired formula. You know the type. Enormous map filled with repetitive tasks, collectible items everywhere, a story that plays it safe, gameplay that feels similar to the last 5 games you played. Players are noticing that these games can feel more like assembly line products than creative endeavors. As one forum comment bluntly put it, core gamers are finally no longer blindly consuming any old garbage shot out by AAA. One flop from 2024, dynamic pirate adventure players were hoping for. Despite a gigantic budget, reportedly over $600 million, and a decade of development, the game just didn't have the depth to keep players engaged. Stories like that are becoming all too common, massive projects that pour money into graphics and scale, but end up with gameplay that's uninspired. It's a classic case of quantity over quality. Another big factor is the investor-focused mindset of AAA publishers. Let's be real. These companies answer to shareholders, and that often leads to decisions that put profits before players. We've seen an aggressive push of monetization in many AAA games, from pricey DLC and season passes to loot boxes and microtransactions at every corner. Games that once would have shipped as complete experiences now sometimes feel like frameworks built to sell you extras. This has led to a lot of half-baked launches as well. Games released too early, lacking polish or content because they had to make a fiscal quarter or hit a marketing window. Players have noticed, and they're fed up. And here's the thing. Gamers aren't sticking around for that anymore. The average age of gamers has gone up, and many of us remember when games were just games. It's telling that in 2024, so many high-profile AAA releases flopped or underperformed that some called it the year AAA gaming collapsed. Games with recognizable names and huge ad campaigns failed to meet expectations, whether due to bugs, lackluster design, or player backlash over greed. Even Assassin's Creed Shadows, despite its decent reviews, did not become the smash hit Ubisoft hoped. On PC, it had meager player counts for a series of its fame, and overall, it seemed to come and go without much excitement. When a flagship franchise in feudal Japan only gets a lukewarm response, you know something's off. It suggests that many gamers simply weren't impressed. Perhaps Shadows was competent, but too formulaic, too familiar, or missing that spark of innovation. So, is Schedule 1 single-handedly destroying the entire AAA industry? Maybe that's a bit dramatic, but it's definitely a symbol of a major shift. It's a small champion showing the big guys how it's done, and if the big studios don't learn from this, they risk losing more and more players to the indie scene. The message is clear. Gamers are craving experiences that put them first. Whether it's a quirky drug-dealing sim that feels like a cozy management game or any other labor of love, players will flock to what makes them feel something, be it excitement, curiosity, nostalgia, or just simple joy. If the big publishers want to win back that loyalty, they'll need to trim the fat and rediscover the fun, because right now, one of the hottest games on the planet has none of the usual AAA trappings, and nobody seems to miss them. It's honestly a bit poetic. The gaming community is saying, we just want good games, and a lone developer answered that call, beating the odds and the industry titans in the process. I, for one, find that incredibly inspiring as a gamer. It means the future of gaming might not be in ultra-cinematic, corporate-designed blockbusters, but in the wild, wonderful ideas of passionate creators who remember why we all fell in love with games to begin with. If you enjoyed hearing this story as much as I enjoyed telling it, feel free to hit the like button and subscribe for more cool gaming tales. Maybe share it with a friend who's been disillusioned with the latest AAA releases. It might give them hope that great games can come from anywhere. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy gaming.